Here we go on episode 70 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast, where we talk about growing, scaling, building your junk removal dream and other things. As we get into season 2, we're starting to talk about more things beyond junk removal. Today, I have no idea what we're talking about. I'm in a lake house, more specifically sitting in my Jeep in a garage at a lake house. Casey is somewhere. Every time I look down here, it's because I'm looking at Casey because I got the laptop. It's a whole thing. Anyhow, Casey, what the hell are we talking about today?
Well, first off, I want to make sure that your garage is open if you have your Jeep on, else you're going to pass out halfway through the zips.
No, the Jeep is not
Um,
on. I'm sitting in
oh, it's not on.
yeah, and here's the deal. There's 7 cars here. I'm spending time with the
Oh,
girlfriend and her family, and it was
gotcha.
determined that my Jeep was the smallest vehicle because there's 6 cars in the driveway, and so I got self-selected to occupy said Jeep garage
Okay.
spot only because I A, have a small vehicle, and B, I know how to park it and back it in.
Okay. But so
So
that
yeah,
would kind of suck if halfway through this you just, oh, and he's gone. Yeah. Carbon
no, no,
monoxide's a
no, no,
bitch.
no, no. No one's dying. Jeep is off. I'm not driving anywhere. Also, I have an extension cord coming through the window, so it's plugged into the laptop. So
That's
basically, I'm
awesome.
using my Jeep as a photo booth. I had to move my steering wheel. I don't want it to get in the shot. Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Casey's in the audience. That's Taylor. For anyone that hasn't ever heard Taylor's voice, that's Taylor. He's our producer. Apparently, since I'm, shooting this episode from the inside of my Jeep, and Casey's,
Hmm.
in a nice established place, Taylor's just, he's feeling the need to jump in here. So anyhow, before I so
Well,
rudely
so,
interrupted you, Casey, what are we doing today? 'Cause I'm on
yeah,
vacation.
so today we're
For
talking
the first
about
time ever, I'm on vacation.
processes. Oh, yeah, it's true. That's
It's
not true.
true.
Well, it is true.
Casey, it is true. I don't.
It
I've
is.
shot a couple
Yeah.
episodes from like hotel rooms on conferences, not like
For airports.
or airports. Yeah, more specifically. Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. I've done an episode from an airport. I've done an episode from a parking structure garage or
So
rent a
why?
car
Yeah.
parking structure garage. You're right. Those were not vacations. Those were worky work
Yeah, so for
trips.
those of you listening, we spend all of our money on our luxurious podcast room and studio
Yeah,
that changes every single week. So,
correct.
you know,
No, my travel budget is by far the most expensive part of my life is going to conferences and things. So you're right. And every time I
mm,
shoot another episode from a hotel room or whatnot, there we go.
yeah, so today we're talking about processes and the importance of having them. And the reason why we're going this route is we had a guest, but unfortunately they bailed because they
Mm.
miscalculated a job, which happens. We hear
Yeah,
you.
well, yeah.
Um, it's literally why we had this podcast, though, is to prevent those kind of fires from even happening in the first place. So, um,
Mm.
yeah, man, processes. I think a big thing that I'm seeing right now is, you know, people are slow in a busy type season that they're used to being busy, or they're
Mm.
slammed, and normally they're not. So it all comes down to one thing: is what do you do when either one happens? If you're slow or busy, you have processes in place to carry you through. I see a lot of questions on these Facebook groups about, hey man, when should I get another truck? When should I get another trailer or whatever? The problem is there's no specific one answer. Actually, I disagreed with Lee Godbolt, owner of JRA. I agree partly with him. He said after a certain amount of money, you should get a second vehicle. The problem is there has to be some consistency
Yeah.
behind that. And you also have to realize with every truck you add to your company, you need to add 3 more people. At the same time, you need to have a process to support it on the back end as well as that front end service, or else you're just going to have a nice driveway ornament
Mm.
that you spent 60K on. So I think it's a
So
great subject.
so I want to build a foundation. Oh, there's another Jeep pulling in front of me, which I waved to other Jeeps. Hi, Jeep. I'm not driving, and there's no way he saw me since I'm sitting here in a garage, and they are rocking the
Throw
American
a rubber
flags with the
ducky at
white
them.
Jeep. I will. I have a rubber ducky. Here we
Gee,
go.
Nick.
This is my Nashville rubber ducky. This is my Batman rubber ducky. Oh yeah, I don't even collect them. People give them. Actually, my daughter gave me the one. All right, so here is why process is important. I love me some process. When I talk about the 6
Hmm.
buckets of business, the operations bucket is my top bucket. Oh, you know what that Jeep was? It was a dang old mail carrier. That was kind of dope. All of a sudden, they drove by the second time and they had U.S. Postal Service. That's kind of cool. I want to live a lake life where I could drive around in a Jeep. You know what? That's why I was wondering, why is it left-hand drive or a right-hand drive? There we go. It was a right-hand drive Jeep delivering mail. Who knew? Um, Getting back to what I was saying before I so rudely interrupted myself by the squirrel thought. Um, 6 buckets of business: marketing, sales, operations, the thing you do, resources that are human, and the numbers. I'm a huge fan of operations. It's in my top three. So I go high three, low three. So I'll say it's in my high three, along with sales and numbers. Those are my high three when it comes to the junk removal world. I love operations, and this is why. Operations is your new baseline. So one thing I learned in the military years ago is we put out SOPs, standard operating procedures, and we
Hmm.
say, hey, these are the minimum rules we live by. So there's certain things we know in the military: time, place, uniform. When you get that right, you're ahead of you're ready for 95% of what you have to do that day. When you show up in the right time, or right at the right time, in the right place, with the right uniform
A
to
uniform.
include equipment,
You
right?
can always add, but not take away.
When you do that, you are going to be 95% successful in the military. So, for example,
Uh-huh.
one of the things in the military is if you have formation at 07, the expectation is 10 minutes prior. That is a standard that is spoke about, and that is the new standard. So, if formation, or if you see on the training schedule, or someone puts out formations at 07, the expectation is 10 minutes prior, so 0650. When someone shows up at 0651 and you don't say anything, you've just established a new standard that's now 9 minutes prior. And then someone's going to show up at 652, and now you're saying, well, it's 8 minutes prior. Because every time you let a standard slip and you do not make corrective actions, you've now changed the standard. And it's no different than with your business. When you say, hey, this is the best practice, this is the way we always do it. So, for example, junk removal: I will die on this hill. Fuel your trucks up at night. 100% every time, no questions asked. Not three-quarter tank, not a half a tank. Every night you fuel up the truck. This is like
Uh-huh.
enterprise rental car. We will fucking ding you if you come back with less than a full tank.
Yeah.
Why? Because when we do not fill up our tanks every night, it leads to problems the next day. Not every time. However, when you always fill it up, you are always ready for the day. And that goes with time, place, uniform. Part of the uniform is having your tools and equipment. Well, your truck is your biggest piece of equipment. And here's why: 90% of the time, you don't fill up your truck at night. If you habitually don't fill it up at night, you'll get away with it. However,
Mhm.
10% of the time, it's going to bite you in the ass somehow, some way, shape, or form. They're going to forget their credit card at home, or it's not going to be in the pouch, or they're going to be really far out and have to go get fuel, and that gas station is going to be down to one pump. It's going to take them 20 minutes to fuel up, right? Something is going to happen that is bad, and it's 100% preventable. That's what operations is. It is the new baseline. When you put out a
Uh-huh.
SOP, standard operating procedure, like we always fuel up our truck at night, when you execute on that and when you hold people accountable, you never have to talk about running out of fuel in the middle of the day again when it's not predicted. If you're out
Right.
there driving 4 or 5 hours in your day because you got a long ass far job, okay, you build it into the schedule. Most times we do not have to get fuel during the day unless we have one of those far out jobs. You got to be driving 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours, depending on your truck type and everything else, right? Most junk removal days, you're not on the in the truck driving at a high rate of speed for 3 to 4 hours. So that is what I'm talking about, and that's what Casey's talking about with SOPs. Because what happens with entrepreneurship, we know this, it's a fucking roller coaster. You have really, really high highs, you have really, really low lows. When you establish a new standard, when you have new operations and you follow them, you've now raised the bar. So those peaks and valleys do not seem as drastic. And that's what it comes down to. So, for example, let's use Lee's example. Lee says once you're doing, if I recall, the number is 15,000 a month, add another truck, and the number is somewhere between
I
10 and
think it was
20,
like 30 or something like that.
maybe
I don't know.
30. Well, when you can, right,
I'll pull
and
it up. How
so
about this? Keep talking. I'll pull it up.
he'll pull it up, right? So let's say the number is 20 for simple hillbilly math, right? What Casey is saying, right? So we can agree with both. Okay, so Casey's saying, or was at least saying, hey, once you do 20,000 a month, then you add another truck. What Casey is saying is consistency over time. So then the standard can be like, once you're averaging over 20,000 a month over a rolling 90 days. I'm a big fan of rolling 90, 180 in 1 year. That's how I operate my business. I don't necessarily look at reports that are year to date, because the year to date in January and February is significantly different than June and July. I'm more interested in the rolling 12 months or rolling 90, rolling 180 days. So then what the standard could be is, hey, once you have $20,000 on a rolling 90 days and you're not in Q3, because I don't believe in adding, or Q4, I'll say, adding trucks going into the winter, for example, in the north, not a great idea. It isn't, because you slow
Hmm.
down in Q1. So if you say, hey, here's our standard, rolling 90 days, 20,000 average per month, and we're not in Q4, because everything you do today affects 90 days from now. So Q4, right, you're really buying for Q1, and that's not the time to add a truck. So then you say, okay, that's our thing. So if it's Q1 and you have a 20,000 average, right, going into February, and you had a really strong January, for example, okay, go make the purchase. And those are high level strategic decisions. Most of the operations we're going to be talking about today, and most of the operations you say within your company, you say, hey, what's the best practice for us? So, for example, when is it right to go to the landfill? Do you wait till you have a full truck? Do you wait till you have a certain amount of weight? Do you wait till you're so close to the landfill? What is the trigger that you say, okay, now we're going to the landfill, versus, hey, now we're going to go to the shop, or we're going to go to the donation center, or we're going to go to to scrap? So for us, if you have scrap on your back, you will recycle it 100% of the time. I'm talking sheet iron. There's other guys out there, they're like, oh, it's not worth it. I'll just throw off a washer or dryer here and there. That's not the standard we uphold in our business. So for us, you either go to the scrapyard across the street from the landfill, you stop at the shop and unload scrap, or you go to the landfill first and then unload scrap if you have to go to the landfill. Because majority of our loads, if you have a mixed load, it comes back to our warehouse first. That is our standard. Almost
Well,
100% time. Can't
I
find
can't
Lee's
find
thing.
this. I'm still looking for it, but
It's fine.
so
I got
pretty
plenty.
much the gist was, hey, when do you think it's time to get a second truck? I think he was like, I just had my first $30,000 month,
Yeah.
and um, Lee and I kind of both said two different great points that I agree with part of his, and
Yeah.
like you were saying, the one thing I will say though is someone also commented saying, well, maybe hold off until your slow season hits. Just kind of like what you're saying, rolling 12 months is really the greatest way to look at it,
Yeah.
because as we're seeing, before 2020, right? Before the COVID happened, seasons were set, man. Like our busy season was the same every year. But for
Yep.
some reason, after 2020, I noticed that everybody's seasons shifted.
Yeah.
Summertime, people were slow, and it's like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to, booming in the summer. You had some people doing great, hitting great numbers in the wintertime. And you're just like, man, this is different. So now you have to kind of adjust to the seasonal change, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, to the point of, and obviously there's a movie, Glengarry Glen Ross.
Mm.
And there's a quote in there: "Always be selling, right?
ABC.
Or always be closing." I'm sorry,
ABC. Always be closing. Yeah.
always be closing. Well, in this business, you look at the business as a whole, very labor intensive. And there's a couple of things you need to always be doing. And as an entrepreneur, it's easy to say, oh, how can I do all this? But at the same time, you're trying to do everything. So, you know, the comments, it's kind of wait, catch 22. But always be marketing is one of them.
Mm.
Always be
Yep.
hiring is
Mm.
the other very important one,
Yep.
because I like to say, keep your bullpen full.
Yep.
Um, but it's also always be improving your fighting position.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is, if tomorrow your main guy, family emergency, I got to go for a couple months, I don't know when I'll be back, if I'll be, what happens to your business? If tomorrow you have two drivers quit, we're
Mm-hmm.
gone is the days of 2 weeks
Or,
notices, by the way, especially in this
or,
industry.
or, or, a,
Um,
or what if, no, no, or let's look the other side. Let's be more optimistic. What if all of a
yeah,
sudden tomorrow a big apartment complex calls you and says, hey, we have a 90-day
there you go.
project, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Because there's that
absolutely.
also, right? Let's
Yeah.
lean in, right? Because a lot of people, when you train for failure, you either
Mhm.
avoid it because you're like, well, I don't want that negative thing to do, so I'm going to do all the stuff to avoid that negative thing from happening versus preparing
Yeah.
for it, right? Or you do nothing because you're like, well, it'll never happen to me, and if it does, then I'll just deal with it at the time. Well, what if all of a sudden something amazing happens, right?
Yeah.
What if one of your competitors goes out of business, right? And calls you and says, "Hey, here's all my accounts. Please call these people because something catastrophic happened to me." Right? I mean,
Yeah. So
it,
what do you do
it,
first? Do you buy truck first, or do you hire people
well,
first?
and I can tell
Right?
you, buying a truck is a 1 day process. Hiring
Yep.
somebody and training them to standard Not 1 day. I don't know what the number is, right? I'll say greater than 1 day, somewhere between greater than one
Yes.
day and less than 1 year to get them to standard. And it is subjective based on the person you hire. The other thing is, I think about this in football. I'm a huge Packer fan. Go Pack Go! Coming up 6 weeks from Jordan Love going out there and fucking slaughtering the Bears. No big deal. Uh, Here's the deal. I'm going to put this. Let's get our disclaimers out of the way. Uh, Jordan Love. Here's the deal. Packer fans, Packer Nation, we've had 30 years, 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterbacks. The pedigree is there. They both rose up from the ashes of a
I like how
first
you say
round
both.
draft pick. They
In 30
both were
years, we've
first,
had two
hold on.
quarterbacks.
They were both first round draft picks that sat for a little bit, right? The Favre sat on the bench of the Falcons and then sat behind Don the Magic Man Mikowski. No big deal. Shout out number 7. And then the Rodgers first round draft pick sat behind the most entertaining football player of all time, Brett Favre, and sat behind him and learned 3 years apprenticeship. Jordan Love, 3 years apprenticeship, sitting behind the 2 time in a row, 3 time in total, or maybe 4 time. I'm not sure. 4 time, I think. 4 time MVP, Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl MVP, sat behind him for 3 years. I'm gonna say it right now. Jordan Love, 15-year run, Hall of Fame. Put it in your fucking sports book right now. What are the odds are of Jordan Love making the Hall of Fame? I'm putting $100 on it
Hmm.
right now. You can take that one to the bank. That's the first disclaimer. Second disclaimer, Jobber. If I mention Jobber later in this podcast, it's because they fucking love me and I love them. That's it. And they sweeten the deal by giving me credits on my account when you sign up for Jobber. Actually, someone recently hit me up, was using a different software. We had a great
Okay.
conversation. Brought them over to the Jobber side of the house,
Ready?
and they jumped on the Jobber, and they're like, "Hey, this is awesome. This is less expensive than what I was spending,
Hmm.
and I'm getting more of the things I need and want and desire." Third thing was he was
Yeah.
going from a 1 truck operation to 2 trucks. He's like, "This is gonna be a lot
Mm.
simpler to train um, my new cruise on because I understood the other one. I don't know that they would have understood the other one. This is a lot simpler." So there you go. There are your 3 points. Shout out Jobber. Now that we got all the business out of the way, Jordan Love, Hall of Fame quarterback, Jobber, awesome people that give me credits on my account. What were we talking about before I talked about? Oh, depth. Here's the thing I understand
Yeah.
about the NFL. I'll get back to it. I will get back to it. Here's the thing about the NFL that I find interesting. It's like mid-season, like on a Tuesday,
Hmm.
and be like, "Oh, the Packers signed this random cornerback to the practice squad, right?" And
Yeah.
then they release him on Saturday. They're like, "Yep, didn't work out." And I'm always like, "Man, that was a waste of why'd they do that?" Well, it's like, well, maybe they saw something in him. And you know what? They
Yeah.
ran the play, they tested him out, and on the same token, we got Nixon 2 years ago, uh, cornerback, special teams guy. And half, like all season, he's like, let me do punt returns, let me do kick returns. And they're like, no, we're going to have this
Hmm.
other guy who's absolutely garbage doing it. Garbage. Finally, they're like, all right, Nixon, go out there and do punt returns, kick returns. Turns out he was the top player in the league for average per punt return or kick return after that. Because right? And it's like, well, shit, the Packers would have never even seen it had they not executed. And they didn't go out like, oh man, this guy sucks. We need to go find a new punt returner and kickoff returner. No, they're like, okay, this guy sucks.
Hmm.
Who do you have internal that already knows a little bit about our team? And it's no different than your junk room business. Are you going to go out there and hire a crew chief or a fleet commander or whatever? Or are you going to bring people on, a junk room specialist, that's what we use for entry level, and say, okay, well, what else
Hmm.
can you do? You might end up
Well,
with a really good
that's the
operations
important thing.
person or marketing person that happens to do junk removal for you now, and that's how you
Yeah.
keep people around because they're like, oh shit, there's upward promotion within this company. I can do more than hum couches out of basements all day, and then you
Well,
get
and that's
engagement, and it's because you're consistently hiring, which I learned from you,
yeah, and
Casey. I didn't before. I never did that before. Now
right,
we do it.
and it's because there's the most important thing I heard honestly was my stepdad told me this. He goes, line up your guys and
Yep.
go down the list and say, this guy right here, do you want 10 more like him? And if your
Mm-hmm.
answer is no, why do you have one?
Why do you have
And
one?
I'm
Yeah.
like, gosh, that's a great point. At the same time, I also encourage people to go rate their employees, right? If you don't do any kind of reviews, if you have 2 or more employees, hell, if you have one full-time guy, I think, and I suggest you do a monthly review with them over their strengths with the business, what you would like to see more of, or hey, this is how last month went. This is what I saw. Maybe you need some improvements in this area. I think it's very important in the military. And yes, we learned a lot from the military. Um, it's sidetrack real quick, but the most basic, boring, degrading shit that we learned in the military makes so much sense now when you are a business owner. It is
Mm-hmm.
insane. The simplest thing called a layout, an equipment layout.
Mm-hmm.
Man, did we hate doing that. I tell you what, when you're a business owner, that's gold. You do that like once a week. Let's do a layout, guys. Everybody hates it, but now I know why it's important. Same thing with personnel. So every sports team, you want to do a sports analogy, that's fine. Right now, the Rangers are hot. Texas Rangers are hot. And, everybody says, oh, after the All-Star break, they go downhill. Well, the Rangers this time around kept that momentum and they made a huge move recently. They traded for an All-Star pitcher, Max Scherzer or whatever, right? This dude's he's a badass. Now a lot of people are like, well, why would you do that this late in the season? Well, here's two reasons I think. One is you have enough time to get this guy acclimated to your team before playoffs. And two, this dude is not one, I don't think he has 10 years left in him. Absolutely not. But he
Mm-hmm.
probably has another year left in him and he's hot. So why not get him on the team now, make that huge push into the playoffs, maybe even to get the pennant. But those personnel shifts are improving their team. Like your point, bring someone on for a week or two. I didn't work out. You know what? At least you tested it out. Same rule of thumb with any business, but especially junk removal. I saw this a lot. I'd have a guy come in full of piss and vinegar. I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do anything. Blah, 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 blah. A
Oh, I
week
get it.
later, doesn't
Yeah,
answer his
gone.
phone. Sorry, something came up. Got another job. Well, what happened? Well, I just got another job. Here's the deal. It doesn't really matter what happened. Only thing that matters is you didn't prepare yourself for what if that happens. And I hate to live in the what ifs, but in this day and age, you're not just competing with other junk removal companies or landscaping companies. You're competing with early wage companies.
Mm-hmm.
I lost two guys to Target because they paid more and it was indoors.
And air
I
conditioning.
can't compete with that.
It's 107 a day down there in Dallas. No big deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
So I can't
so
compete with that.
so couple basic principles you're stating, and this is what you're talking about is practical execution of a couple things. First off,
Mm-hmm.
hire slow, fire fast. Took me
Yes.
years to learn that. We're still looking for the right operations person within our business. In the last 6 months, we've hired 3 people. The average tenure is 5.5 days right now. That's
Yeah.
how long the average person has made it, including one person who got out after 5 days. So one person made it 5 days, one person made it 6 days, one person went home halfway through the fifth day. Was like, yep, I said I
Mm-hmm.
could do this, I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't. So there's the first principle that I'm hearing. Hire slow, fire fast. Second principle. I love this one and it proves to be true. And one of my guys came up to me the other day. It was like, I hate giving you credit for this shit, but you're so true. And this principle is the more you talk, the less I listen. When I've
Mm-hmm.
had employees, the more they talk in the first 30 days, I was about to say 90 days. The thing is, they don't make it 90 days. The more they
Mm-hmm.
talk in the first 30 days, the less likely they're going to be at day 30. And so one of
Yeah.
my guy's Ryan, who he's our one of our top two guys when it comes to banging jobs. He's definitely our number one guy when on demo and commercial work. We have another guy who's really good at full house cleanouts and things like that. Anyways, Ryan came up to me the other day. He's like, because they had a big job and we had brought in a handful. I say temps, and temps mean to me either we're bringing guys off the street that we know about, or we actually go to temp service, whatever. But in our head, they're temporary employees. A lot of times they're guys that we know or they're friends of somebody at work. We're like, hey man, we're going to put you on the job for a week, and either you can do it or you can't. Anyways, we had this guy ran his mouth. He's like, "Yep, I'm gonna be the best employee. I'm gonna be the best employee." Day one, he's like, "All right, guys, let's do this." We had a big project we were tackling. Noon on the third day, he's like, "Fuck this, let's leave." And mind you, this job was like 2 hours away from our shop, and it was a week long project. But and they're basically like, "All right, man, well, you can fucking Uber home if you want. Those are your options: Uber home or shut the fuck up."
Yeah.
And that's it. So for me, the more people talk in those first 30 days, the less I listen. Last thing you said and you started saying, and this is part of the layout, right? It is what I consider to be start, stop, continue methodology of change, which ties in the Army with your AAR, after action review.
Mm-hmm.
What went right, what went wrong, what do we sustain, what do we improve? And so I break it down a little simpler because there's a lot of things in the military where it works for the Army, and the principle applies in the civilian world. However, there's a better methodology in the civilian world. So I utilize stop, start, continue methodology of change. So even with the layout, it's like, okay, we know this is good for us, so we should do this every week. We should continue doing it. Why? Because when we don't do it, we end up on job sites and we don't have our shit. Or
You have a
we
truck
end up
with
at,
3 times the amount of
yeah,
tools and equipment.
great. One truck has 3 dollies and the other 2 trucks have none
Yeah.
because we didn't reset. Because you know what shit happens. Sometimes 3 trucks go to a job site and tools get crossed over. Like that's an operational reality. So what is the
Well,
fix? What have we scrubbed that? It's no different than your accountant. It's like, yeah, you have a bookkeeper that might put all the numbers in, but I guarantee it, if you want to stay out of fucking jail and stay off the IRS, you're going to send all that information to a CPA at some point. It's like you don't need a
hmm
CPA to do your books. However, you need a CPA to do your taxes. Same thing here.
Yeah.
It's like you don't need to do a layout after every single job. However, once a week, it's probably a pretty good cadence. Make sure all the equipment
Well,
gets in the right
it's
trucks.
we can always simplify every step as well.
Yeah.
So what we've started doing is color coding each truck.
Yep.
Hey, the white truck,
Yep.
if this truck code was white, that means every tool had a
Yep.
white tape on, and then
Yep.
blue
Cost
tape,
you
and then
a
red tape,
can of spray
whatever.
paint. That's all it costs.
Yeah, and it's that simplicity that goes so far because yes, if you have a layout, you can do the counting. Oh, I'm going to count. Oh, okay, we have 4 shovels and we have 5 trucks. That means we're missing a shovel. Or
Math.
you can say red, white, blue, orange. Where's the yellow? I see yellow tools, but I don't see yellow shovel.
Yep.
Um, there's all these different ways of doing it. Is it time consuming? First, yes, but it's something that is very simple and it lasts a long time. The other thing is when it goes right back into processes I remember when I visited your warehouse in the very, very beginning in the JDog years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you had a very similar uh, start process as I did. Yours was a little bit more refined that I liked. You had a crate, and I know you changed it since then. You had a crate. That's where your sawzall would be in. That's where a recip saw, and that's where your phone, all this other crap would be in this one crate. The driver would sign it out first thing in the morning, and then hit the road. We had a similar process too. It was, hey, you come in, you sign out your keys, your phone or
Mm-hmm.
iPad, whatever it was, and then you hit the road. You have to go do your pre-trip checks every
Mm-hmm.
single morning. So when I would schedule the guys, the driver knew this was standard. The driver, if you're scheduled for 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, you're here at 6:50,
Mm-hmm.
walking around that truck, which means you need to be here at 6:45 so you can get things started, and then you can do your walk around and checklist. That
Yep.
way, by 7 a.m., your help's here. They just showed up. They're ready to roll. The
Yep.
other thing is, and I know a lot of people can relate to this, is I tell people all the time, I do not care if you want to get a cup of coffee. Do it before you clock in.
Yep.
Do it before you clock in. I hate the time when they show up. Hey, I'm on time. But then
No.
there's a
Yeah.
15-minute pause. And why is this truck chilling at QT down the street? Oh,
But,
they're getting their coffee, their
yeah.
tobacco.
Uh, on time and ready for work are two different things.
Yes. Well, there's no such thing as on time. I heard this in a movie the other day. There's no such thing as on time. There's just early or late. I like that.
We had a so at Waste Management when I was there, now WM, which I'm still struggling with that one. Like when United Parcel Service went to UPS, it was no big deal because everyone called them UPS for like 20 years
hmm
before that, so it was only a logo change. Waste Management, on the other hand, internally they refer to it as WM and have for a long time because it's WM.com and everything else. However, externally everyone still called it Waste Management. I'm also watching a guy back up a truck and he just basically took out 7 bushes. Like his between his vehicle carbon emissions and taking out the bushes, we might lose some animals in this forest that I'm currently staying in. Anyhow, WM. So what the rule, the standard at WM was ready to work. So what would happen
hmm
was we would have and it was always on the hour. So our 04 shift, so 4 a.m. shift was 4 a.m. We start saying words because that was 4 to 4. 05 was the at the time it was safety meeting, and then eventually went to a business meeting, right? And then at 4:05 we walk out. The problem was guys, and also they had to find what ready to work meant. They had it. You have to the point where it's your boots are tied. And so I remember I had a guy on a shift because I basically I the 04, 05, 06 launches. I was the MOD. I was the manager on duty that did all the launches. So the 04 launch was commercial drivers. The 05 launch was the roll off drivers. 06 was residential drivers. Fine. So one of the guys, Monroe Carter, remember, uh, he was not one of my drivers. He was a roll-off driver. So at the 05 launch, it says 05. I start saying words, and you are ready to work. And the waste management was boots tied, shirt tucked in, PPB vest, hat, belt, as necessary. Anyways, so he sits down, and as I start talking, he's putting his PPE on, he's putting his safety vest on, and he leans down to tie his boots. So after the meeting, I walked up to him. I'm like, "Hey, man, you weren't ready for work, and they're union, right? So you basically would dock them. Hey, I'm going to dock you. I'm going to put you down as tardy." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was here. I was like, "Well, this is what the standard is," and I had it in my hand, right? And I explained it to him. And that particular interaction, the reason I remember it is because we ended up chest to chest, saying things that would have probably both got us fired had someone else overheard it, right? And and I could stand there and not think twice about it because I went by the standard. And it wasn't even like he wasn't even pissed. He took it as I was singling him out. I'm like, "Hey, man, everybody else here had their boots on. That's it. And they were tied. That's what it meant to be ready to work." And again, me being military, I didn't fuck around with the letter of the law. That's what it meant. Like if you would have show up in the army into formation with your boots untied and you're like, "Oh, no big deal, I'm just going to tie them here while I'm sitting in formation." Like for those of you that can't see Casey, he's laughing because if you were there laughing, and I would argue that if you watch your guys at work, I guarantee you somebody's coming in,
Oh
they'll
yeah,
go to
they're
the
just getting
clock
dressed.
first, they'll punch in, or what your methodology is, write their time in, and then they're going
Hmm.
to go do something that doesn't pay your bills. They're going to go take a
Like go,
piss. They're going to go make a cup of
or
coffee,
even worse.
right? They're going
Yeah.
to go to the locker room or designated area to go get their boots, right? Nope. When you don't nip that in the bud, when you have one or two guys and you're like, "Nah, whatever, it's no big deal." They're just like, "Oh," like this guy Joe. So we used to run our business out of our house, and Joe lived at the house. So there was like three employees that lived at the house. So again, total hillbilly, friends, family business we ran. And Joe would come downstairs in our morning meeting and we'd be making toast. And so the entire morning meeting, the kid had like 8 slices of toast every morning. Like he'd be sitting there just dropping bread like it was hot because he wanted toast. And so like the joke was like, "Oh yeah, Joe's gonna make toast." So he's like, "Well, I'm here, I'm in the meeting." It's like, "Yeah, but you're making toast. So you're not really in the meeting. I'm not gonna pay you at 7:15 because you walked out of your room and started making toast and in your Crocs or your flip flops." And again, it's funny when I say it here, and yet there's people in your business, once you get employees, not like you and one other guy or you and a partner. Once you get employees, they're going to take advantage of you. Or like
Well,
was
and that's the thing
you got the
is,
QT, we got the Quick Trip. It's 3 blocks
so
away.
I think we can all agree that in this line of work, there's something to be said about the kind of work you do that kind of creates a brotherhood type mentality.
Oh yeah.
Um, when you're out there sucking in the sun, it's 105 degrees, and you have other people doing it. You start to not just look at them as employees, and I get it. But here's the thing: the second, and I mean this, I've seen it every single time. The second you get complacent with your guys, they see it as a friend, not a
Mm-hmm.
an owner of the company, not a boss of the company or whatever. They look at it like, oh, I just found wiggle room. Now I can kind
Oh
of
yeah.
get away with some shit. And the problem with
100%.
that is new people that come in see this, that's their standard. It goes right back to standards.
Yep.
So the other thing is, at the end of the day, Andy, I want you to answer this question. At the end of the day, what is the minimum you expect from each driver before they leave for the day? What do they do with the trucks? What do they
Yep.
do before they leave?
Minimum standard is the truck is emptied, right? It's emptied whether
Hmm.
right where you went to the landfill, you went to the scrapyard, went to a donation, or you unload at the yard, right? Or the truck is prep, right? Or the truck is, if sometimes we'll load up a truck to go donation first thing the next morning, right? So
Hmm.
the truck, the back of the truck is emptied, ready to go. The tools and equipment are back in the place they need to be. The cab of the truck is fucking cleaned out because that's the biggest issue,
Yes, it's
right?
the
The
hugest
goddamn
thing.
Gatorade bottles and water bottles everywhere. So the cab of the truck is
Fitters,
cleaned
yeah.
out. The truck is parked in the right spot, which again, if you have one or two trucks, not a big deal. However, when you get to 10, 12 trucks, there's a designated spot for every truck because there's a reason behind it, and that's going to change based on your business. So it's parked in the right spot. Your clipboard is turned in, and what's included with your
Mhm.
clipboard is the keys and credit card associated with that truck. Your cell phone's turned in and plugged in, because turned in and plugged in are two different steps. All cash checks and receipts from the day are turned into operations. And
Mhm.
operations clears you, i.e., yep, all your jobs are done. I have cash check, credit card, whatever for all your jobs, and you're good to go. And then, and you are, and because we had guys that always struggled punching in and punching out, and you punch out, right? And
So we
these are
had
like,
a
the basic minimums.
Yeah.
If I took the time to like, what else? I'm sure there's a lot of other
Let's,
shit. Those are the
well, yeah, and
basics, though.
I add one.
Yeah,
I'll
go.
add one to it because we had an epidemic of dents showing up on tickets.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's interesting.
I was like, dude, all you got to do is tell me. No one wanted to do it. So
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we
yeah.
added
Report. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
one
Oh,
more.
yeah. I missed it.
We had
Report any
an extra
accidents,
step.
injuries. Yeah, or
Yeah. So we had an extra step at the end
anything.
of the day.
Mm,
We actually went outside, walked the truck, and we
mm,
associated with pictures we took at the beginning of the month
yeah,
of each truck. And
that's
every day we
interesting.
would do that. So that way it's like, oh, well, this doesn't match the picture, and you were
That's new.
the last driver, and you didn't
Yeah.
tell me this. Well, I didn't do it. Well, I mean, math tells me you did. So the thing is,
We went from 2
when
dents to
you
3 dents.
yes, and when you give an inch, expect mile because
Yeah.
unfortunately that's how it is. And when you are not the owner of a company, I don't care how great of an employee you are, you're not going to view the company or treat the company as well as the owner does in most
Hmm.
cases.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
So there's
so
there's Gary V. A really good video
yeah,
out there when this guy is at a Gary V conference, and Gary's like, "How do I get people to care about the company as much as I do?" And he's like, "You don't. You're never going to be the owner. They're
no,
never going to be the owner of the company. They never built it. They're never the founder.
no.
They will never care as much as you do. And you expect them to care at that level. You're the problem. You will fail. Next question.
Well, and that's the thing is the same rule can be applied to when you're doing a job. There should be a process for every single thing. This driver, and this is how I looked at it. So in the military, for those that don't know, in the military, if you're a driver of a vehicle, you're actually the bottom guy on the pole.
Yep.
You have no leadership responsibilities at all. I know it sounds crazy. Like, why would you put a brand new private in charge of a multi-million-dollar vehicle with people inside? I don't know. But that's how it is in the military. In junk removal, how I did it was my driver was a leader. He was a leadership
Yep.
position. He ran that crew. He was in charge of the schedule, communications. He could delegate as long as it made sense, obviously. But I expected way more out of that driver. And at the beginning and end of the day, he was usually the first one there and last one to leave.
Hmm.
Um, but you could always tell the good drivers because the help, whoever was helping, they would hang out after the clock was out. Like after they clocked out, they would
Yep.
hang out with the driver. They wouldn't rush home. They'd be chilling. And you know what? I didn't care. As long as their duties were done, they could hang out as much as they wanted at the shop and bullshit, relax before they have to go home. I get it.
Yep.
And that's when I knew the driver had something. And then I would talk to him and say, cool, now I'm going to put more responsibility on you because I want the other drivers to be like you.
And and,
And it goes
and one of
straight into processes.
and one of the things you talked about from the beginning was reviews with your employees. And so
Hmm.
with our employee review process, we have 6 different attributes that we evaluate our employees on. And it's attitude, aptitude, or attitude, ability, aptitude, character, competence, camaraderie. And camaraderie being number 6, because when you have decent marks in the first 5, people are going to want to work with you. That's it. When you have a good attitude, when you know how to do your job, when you're competent, then people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I want to work with this guy. And so camaraderie is high. So when you can evaluate camaraderie either the passive way, which is exactly what you're talking about, Casey, and it's so true. This
Yeah.
same thing. I can tell the culture of our business is healthy based on how many people stick around after work. Do they hit the
Yeah.
clock and leave, or do they stick around for a little bit? And I'll be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're bullshitting. And I'll always ask, hey, are you on the clock or off the clock? Because right? I want them to stick around and hang out. I don't want to pay them for that. And so if they're like, no, we're punched out, and it's like, cool. Or I see guys on Saturdays go to brewer games together, or they help
Yeah.
each other move. That I'm like, okay, those like right. These guys have the relationships that's beyond the transaction. Right, transactional
Hmm.
relationship is like, yep, I work with you, you work with me. That's it. It is transactional. We get
You're
paid
creating a
to be
culture.
here. Exactly. And that's the health of a culture. And same with new
Hmm.
guys. When I see new guys, one of the first questions I ask is, I'll ask that we call them team leads or crew chiefs. We ask them like, hey, do you want to work with that guy tomorrow? And they know what I'm saying, right? I'm not even asking like, were they good? Were they no, do you want to work with them tomorrow? Brass tacks, bottom line, do you want to work with them again? And if they say no, then I'll say why, because then I can see, oh well, they weren't listening very well. Well, that's weak, that's fixable potentially, right? Or hey, they're really weak, or they don't know how to do this. Well, it's like, okay, are those coachable things? Because if it's, hey, they don't
Hmm.
know how to pull a couch out of a basement, Well, that you team leader, that's on you. That's your job to train, coach, and mentor them. Now, if they're a non-listening individual, okay, that's something that leadership needs to get involved in and might have to have a coaching conversation. Most
So,
times they'll be able, most times they're able to articulate one or two things that are coachable, right? And then it's a whose responsibility is it to coach them up on that. Now, if you're like, hey, they were sleeping in the truck, like we get that sometimes, like they'll fall asleep in the truck, and it's like we don't want this. Like, well, did you wake them up? No. Well, that's not a them problem. That's a you problem. Like,
you know how many
what are we
times,
doing here?
you know how many times I have fell asleep in a
Oh,
very hot vehicle in the middle of the day
oh
after
my god,
training all day?
I slept
Like,
half
dude,
my damn deployment on the road in Iraq.
there you go. So question from our producer Taylor.
Yeah, see
This
that?
is actually a great point
Yeah.
regarding standards. How should the process look when you're the only guy, when you're the sole guy with the truck to save time and streamline the process? You don't
Well,
have to worry about it as much down the road when you start scaling and growing.
so I'm gonna jump in. This reminds me of a
Yeah.
conversation with Las Vegas Lenny.
Yep.
Las Vegas Lenny was a firefighter, and he figured out how to do almost every job by himself. And if he didn't, he
Hmm.
would get one of his firefighter buddies, be like, "Hey, I need you on the other end of this couch." Basically, what he told me is, I can do every job with the exception of couches on a second floor, and then the basements in
Hmm.
Vegas. So like, he's like the likelihood of a couch on a second floor is minimal because he even figured out, hey, dressers, I'm gonna put them on a dolly. I'm gonna stick on the top side, and I'm gonna take them, strap them down and go one at a time. And Las Vegas Lenny, his whole thing was like, yeah, I don't want to pay somebody; it's gonna cut into my profit margin. I'm like, that's awesome. What happens, Lenny, when you have to work on the firehouse one every 3 days and your phone's ringing? What happens
Hmm.
when you have two customers that want you to do a job at the same time, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
oh shit. And we were eating really good pastrami sandwiches at this Jewish deli in Vegas that's right by the convention center, one of my favorite fucking restaurants in the world. So shout out. And Lenny didn't even know about it. Lenny never been there. I was like, what are we doing here? And I've been in that deli probably half a dozen times. Actually, Casey, you and I went there. Did we go there
Yeah.
for pastrami? Yeah, we went there for pastrami sandwiches, hot pastramis. Anyways, this is what you can do, and this is what I told Lenny as we ate our hot pastrami sandwiches. Document everything. That's it.
Everything.
Write down everything you do throughout the day, how you do it. And then here's the other beautiful thing. Once you write it down, let's say you're like, hey, here are the 10 steps to this one process. Can you get it down to 5 steps? Why is it 10
No,
steps?
can you do,
Is there
try eight?
redundancy in there?
Do eight
Eight.
first.
Can you get it down to
Yeah.
9 steps? Right?
Yeah.
I always want to be aggressive and be like, hey, can I cut this 10-step process down to 5 versus can I get it down to 9? Because chances are you can get rid of one step, but it's like, well, hold on. Can I just cut this thing in
Yeah.
half? And if not, okay, what are the necessary steps? And all of a sudden you'll be like, oh shit, this is better. This is better. Because when you never evaluate yourself and how you do things, you never grow. And so writing it
And
down,
you're the standard
you are the
when
standard.
you're by
And you're like, oh
yourself.
shit,
You're the
I
standard.
could or like the question again, let's go what we talked about at the top. When do you decide to go to one landfill versus the next versus the transfer station? I remember asking that to Lenny, and Lenny's like, well, yeah, if I go to the landfill, and I'm making the numbers up here, he's like, it's if I go to the landfill, it's like $60 a ton. Okay.
Hmm.
But he's like, but if I go to the transfer station, it's $80 a ton. I said, okay. He
Hmm.
goes, but I always go to the transfer station. I said, why? He goes, the landfill cost me an hour of my time while the transfer
Yeah.
station's 15 minutes. It's like, okay,
There
so
you
you're
go.
going to trade 45 minutes for $20 a ton. He goes, absolutely. I go, that's a good call. Right?
Hmm.
I'm like, you know that, right? He's like, yeah, I learned it. I'm like, okay, how's the next guy going to know that?
Hmm.
He didn't have an answer. It's like, okay,
You don't
that's the
have,
determining factor, right?
you
If
have to do
and
that.
now he
You
also
have to
said if you go
draw a line somewhere.
to he also said if you go to the landfill like midday, you're probably all right. But if you go the first 2 hours of the day, like from 6 to 8, everyone's dumping from
Hmm.
the night before because in Vegas they're servicing a lot of shit at night because it's cooler, right? They're like hitting up all the like they're starting to service at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So at 6 o'clock when those landfill doors open, like there's pent up demand, and also at the end of the day, people are trying to empty. So if it's after 2 o'clock, you don't fuck with the landfill. So like even with us, like we sometimes go to transfer stations. One of the things that we determine is weather. Like we don't go to the landfill, for example, when it's raining out because it's boggy and soggy, and our two dump trucks that we have don't have 4-wheel drive. So like there's times where we'll sit on that load till the next morning, especially in winter, because we'll let it freeze. We'll let the landfill get hot, get hard and frozen, and then we'll take that same load up the next morning. And what would have maybe been an hour long, show and getting stuck in an afternoon is now 15 minutes the next morning. Or there are certain transfer stations or landfills that are higher price and yet they're a lot closer. So it's like, well, that makes sense. So you learn those things as a business owner. You need to write that shit down Because when you go start training somebody, you're not going to remember everything you learned on those first 100 or first 1,000 jobs you did by yourself.
Well, yeah, and you also need to understand that, look, regardless of who's doing the business, I've heard it both ways. Oh, I love being in the truck. I don't have a problem being an owner. That's that is. But everybody has obligations to their business. And what happens when you're down? Happens when
Yep.
you can't work. You break a
Well,
leg, you break something, you get
yeah.
hurt, you're sick. Doesn't matter. Who's going to cover down?
Well,
Are they going to cover down?
we,
And
we,
how easy is it to replicate that?
yeah, we had our good buddy James Feltz, who had owned a J Dog
Hmm.
franchise, tore his bicep, and basically he was him and one other guy. He tore his bicep, and his business never recovered. Now he got fucked over by J Dog, which is not new, and I mean, that's not like part of my like show notes. Got to mention it. However, when it's relevant, I will. Hashtag go check out unhappyfranchisee.com if you want to read more about that story and more. Anyhow, he tore his bicep and he had his number two guy then running the business. And he's like, oh, I'll
Hmm.
just run operations and the phones, and he'll go out and and get another guy, and they'll go bang jobs. And it didn't work out for a myriad of reasons. And this other guy, this guy Red,
That's.
awesome dude. But it's like now
Hmm.
Red was solely responsible for banging jobs and training up the next guy, and he wasn't ready. Now he knew his job, but they didn't know he knew the one job up, and he didn't know how to train the one job down. And so
Yeah,
for
and
that
that's.
and a myriad of other reasons, like you can say, like that's the other thing. There's a lot of these guys on Facebook. They're like, oh no, I'm just gonna keep banging jobs myself, and I'm never gonna
Hmm.
stop banging jobs. It's like, yeah, you that might not be your choice someday. And
Yeah.
it's one of those like it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have it come across than not be prepared and have it come across. Like you might have an opportunity to scale your business, or
And I'll tell
or
you
something
this,
happens that you have to
the
scale
the
the
most.
business.
Yeah, and also the most transparent you are with your team, whether you have five, two, or 17 or 20,
Yep.
the better off. Like we had, a couple years ago, we had a really bad winter randomly, and it's Texas, man. So obviously we can't print for that. We're not used to. And it actually shut our business down. It shut pretty much the whole state down for a little over a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had to have a conversation with people. I was like, look, I'm not letting you go. I don't lay
Yep.
people off. I'm asking for patience, and I understand that you have to go get another job to make things work. Um, but if you bear with me, I promise you, I'm doing everything I can to get this schedule filled back up and get us back, in business. Um, I lost one guy out of, I think at the time was a 12. I lost one. One guy said he had to move on. Hey, I
Yeah.
understood that. No, no problem. But they all came back and they understood that, hey, it was out of our control. The weather shit on us.
Yeah.
Um, but it's because of the culture we created. And regardless of the name on the trucks, you and I have talked about this. J Dog was a vehicle. It was. Regardless of that vehicle, though, the business we made was ours. We created the culture in that business. We put the routines together, the processes together. We set the standards. And here's a tricky part for all you entrepreneurs out there. You want the luxury of not having to worry about being challenged the better you get, then get out of business because you took on this responsibility. The higher you set the standard, um, you could have a great month. If your standards go up, guess what? That's now your minimal standard. You're going to always raise the bar. Now your bar's set
Mm-hmm.
higher. And you're going to have to keep that up. And I know sometimes it sounds like, oh, well, that sucks because that month was our best month, but it kicked our ass. Okay, I get it. How can you fix it? How can you sustain that? Is it more people? Is it another truck? I mean, you have to look at everything. How do you simplify it? How do you make it more efficient and more proficient in your processes? Andy, your screen went blank.
My screen went blank, or my face went
Yeah, I
blank.
don't see you anymore.
That's all right. I can see me. Can you hear me? That's all
Okay,
that matters. I mean,
I can hear you. Yeah.
let's for the record, let's
Oh,
not.
internet. Okay,
Oh,
you're good.
internet. Ah,
You're
yes,
good.
the old internet. Here's the deal. First of all, my mouth gets me into and out of all my situations. My face,
Hmm.
that ain't the showstopper. That ain't what people come here for. Okay, we already know
That's what
that.
he said.
It's like 90% of our listeners listen only. Right? There are people that I'm like a voice actor to them. I could be in their hometown right now, and they would never know who I am until I open my mouth. Like, wait, are you that guy that hangs out with Casey every week? Casey, on the other hand, I would say your face is more recognizable. Also, speaking of your face, because we haven't got to all the show notes yet, Meat
Cool.
Church, which is on top of your face, Meat Church, unofficial sponsor of the Trash Talk Business podcast. At some point, I have to go to Texas to the Meat Church. Um, and get some swag, right? Maybe we don't know. Maybe they'll give it to us on the account of all the free advertising they get for our hundreds. We have hundreds of listeners. I was going to sarcastically say like dozens of listeners. No, we have
Thousands.
hundreds of downloads every Monday when these episodes come out. So the hundreds of people, there's probably dozens of people within 50 miles of the Meat Church, because
Hmm.
Texas, it was Texas, California, and Philadelphia, and Pennsylvania are our top three states. I think Florida's up there too. Um,
Yeah.
Also, the Philadelphia market is up there. Maybe it's people that are associated with the franchise listening to
They're
figure out
fans. That's all it is.
how to junk removal. A lot of fans there in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, Fort Worth are two of our top city markets. I was looking at the numbers earlier today. We're about to hit another milestone, 30,000 downloads on said podcast, which, carry the one, that's almost 500 downloads per episode. That's pretty fucking baller. On the
Hmm.
account of, this started off as, hey, we already talk every week, let's be intentional. Or this week where it was like, hey, we're going to talk to these cats from Florida, and they bowed out, and Casey's like, I don't give a shit. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
operations. Well,
Why
here's
not?
the other thing. I'm also like, hey, I'm on vacation. Yeah, no, like, Trash Talk Business Podcast, consistency over time. Yesterday, let me tell you a little analogy. I came up with an analogy yesterday. No shit, there I was in a kayak, and I'm a non-boating type. Like, that doesn't get me off. However, I was with a lady friend, and when you're with a lady friend, you do shit that maybe isn't on your list to start with. So there I am kayaking. Actually, had a good time. Lake was very still, uh, and nobody died. So that's right. What else can you ask for when you're kayaking? And this is what I realized with kayaking. When I went really hard for like 30 seconds, like the rowing machine I do at the gym, I could get fast, and then as soon as I stopped rowing, then whatever wakes or waves were in the water would throw me off kilter. The other thing I noticed, when I was paying attention to the front of my kayak and not my destination, I would get off track also, because there's all these things. And then I was really very, very intentional. Like, what is the analogy I'm learning during kayaking? And these are the things that I found to be true with kayaking and also life, because we're on the far side of the lake going to back to our pier. When I kept my eye on the pier, right, I could still see the tip of my kayak in the periphery. I could still see waves or wakes coming by, and I could also see obstacles that weren't there to start with, because boats move and shit. So I'm like, hey, you know what? Keep your eye on the prize. Like, it's true with kayaking. The other thing I saw was when I would slow down and go at the same pace the whole time, and I never stopped with the oar, I actually went farther faster than I did when I was a mad dash. And I was like, man, that is the analogy for business. It is
It's resistance.
find correct. It is consistency over time. It is find the speed that you can sustain, right? So we were talking about the top of the program, like, oh yeah, I did $30,000 a month. Oh yeah, what'd you do the next month? Oh, 12. Well, what happened?
Yeah.
Well, the whole month I did 30,000. I stopped marketing and advertising and going to networking events and
Exactly.
following up with people on Facebook Messenger. And it's like, okay, so you didn't have a $30,000 month. You had two $20,000 months. That's what you had
Yeah.
over a 60-day period. And so as I was in the kayak yesterday and I was being consistent in my rowing, I didn't get tired out. And I thought back to going back to the military. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, fast is good. You can always add speed. You,
Hmm.
you, you can't add quality. Once you've accepted a lower standard, now increasing your quality is going to be a struggle. If you think your quality is going to go up when you add employees, you're wrong. If you're not giving
Hmm.
5-star service as an individual, you're not going to get 5-star service out of employees, because you've now accepted that 4 stars is good enough in
Yeah.
all that you do. Have a
And
standard for
quality doesn't just work
everything.
one way.
What's that?
The quality doesn't just work with service either. You
No.
have to have a quality of your business because
Yeah,
I
your
had six trucks
brand.
at one point and
Hmm.
my quality of business went down. And I found that four trucks was my sweet spot. Four trucks,
That's
I
it.
could keep up with quality of business and service,
Yep.
not
And,
six, even though six seemed cool. I'm
oh
out and
yeah.
about everywhere. I have a fleet, but my area, my business, it didn't need 6 trucks. It wanted it, but it needed 4, and it made profit big time at 4.
Yeah.
Let's
Hold
do
on. Here
some.
we go. Well, actually, here Taylor. I like what Taylor said to a certain extent.
Yeah,
Taylor says if you don't want to write to document, can you use voice notes or screenshot it or video? Absolutely.
I would do that. I would do it all
I
the
have
time.
a running note on my phone. That's how I wrote my book. I wrote my book based off running notes on my phone. I also use Otter. I also
Hmm.
would write things down on my whiteboard. I don't give a shit how you capture it in the moment. The key is though you have to have it centralized at some point. So however you capture it in the moment, fine. Then centralize it. And you might have an SOP that's like, hey, here's the SOP, and here are the videos to go along with the SOP. It's like, hey, here's the written version, and here's the video version, because people take in content in different way. Or like, hey, even our podcast, like someone yesterday on one of the Facebook groups was like, hey, new to junk removal, what should I do? And all I said was listen to the Trash Talk Business Podcast. Why? Because here, you want to know what's in my brain? Here are 70 episodes, probably close to, I don't know, almost 100 hours worth of content from my brain, Casey's brain, and every guest that we've had on. And over time, it builds as we learn. And so it's like, it's all centralized in one place. If you want more quick hits, go to the YouTube page or go to the Trash Talk Business Podcast VIP page on Facebook, where we have more in-depth conversations versus the how much do I charge for this, uh, or buy my coursework or classwork conversations, right? And I'm going to knock those things because they don't propel us and move us forward. And
Hmm.
and people that have been around for a minute don't even engage in those posts because it's like, well, what's your process? What's your standard for pricing out jobs? If
Yeah.
you don't have one, I'm not going to just mail in an answer like, "Oh, that was a stupid price. You should have charged more." The fuck am I? I don't know, right? The question
Relative to
I'll ask is,
your
"What's your
market,
pricing?
relative to your business,
Yeah, what's your
everything.
pricing matrix? How do you
Yeah.
determine price on jobs? Do you discount shit that's on the side of the road versus stuff that's in a basement? Like, I don't know. Like,
So I
right?
did the simplest form of pricing. I got an average price in my area,
Yep.
and I decided I don't want to be the cheapest.
Nope.
And for our business, we don't need to be the most expensive, but we're going to be competitors with that most
Yep.
expensive guy.
Yeah. Well, I had a lady the other day who was like, how do you compare to the national competitors? I said, I'm less than they are, and my quality is
Yeah.
better. So it's a much greater
Hmm.
value. And they said, well, why is your quality better? I said, because I load and unload things by hand. You come to my warehouse. We last week, right? You talked about transparency, Casey. Last week we had a
By
business
the
after
way, I
5.
saw that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so we had a business after 5, and we had an open house back to back nights. It's the way the calendar worked out. It actually worked out great because basically clean the warehouse one time, got 2 events out of it. So we had over 130 people between the 2 events come through our warehouse, and they're like, "Oh, I can see the difference." I've never visited another junk removal company that I didn't own at a chamber event where they had that level of transparency. And also, hey, here's our scale. This is how we know what our weights are. Like, and that was no different than the conversation we had with the kid from College Hunks. And I'm like, okay, your website says you recycle up to 70%. How do they
Hmm.
know? What metrics do they use? And they're like, yeah, they've never asked. It's like, okay, well, then that's a bullshit
Yeah.
claim. I can show
Well,
you,
and
right?
it's
Like,
flashy. It sounds good,
sounds great. What level of
but
transparency do you have? So it's like I can compete
exactly.
with the national competitors all day, right? Compete in the sense that we're both doing junk removal services. However, I don't have competition because no one's doing it the way that I do. And if people give a shit about the environment, cool, they're going to hire my company. If they want to support a veteran-owned business, they're going to hire my company. If they want the
No
cheapest
one
guy
was
in
doing it
town,
the way we
they're
were
going to
doing it.
find Chuck in a
And
truck. Yeah,
yeah, the way we were
and
doing
I'm good
things,
with
no one
that.
was doing it. And that's why it was hard to, I always found it interesting when people would try to argue with how I did business. And I was like, no offense. It's not the same. It's not apples to apples, man.
No,
I do business differently because it works great for how we do it.
yeah,
And my
this is the
back
difference
end was
between
huge.
Yeah, this is the difference between you taking things to the landfill, you taking things to a donation center. That's the difference,
Yeah.
right? If you're like, I don't give a
Yeah.
shit, okay, landfills, right? If you say I don't give a shit about the environment, I don't give a shit if you're local, and I just want the cheapest guy in town, sounds good. I am not your 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 company. And when people try to convince me otherwise, like, well, what's the cheapest you would do it for? I'm like, this is my price. This is the cheapest I would
Yeah.
do it for. Well, someone else is going to do it cheaper. Sounds good. You should hire them. And sometimes you get people like, well, I want to hire you though. It's like, well, this is my price. This is my standard. Like, and if I lose a job, we're not even lose a job. I don't want to use the job. If someone decides not to hire me, sounds good. That's like you go to. I use this analogy the other day with one of my guys because he's like, "Hey, the customer wants us to cut up a freezer in the basement." I'm like, cool. We don't do that. Well, why not? Well, because Freon. It's not a good idea. Well, and I
I
also
mean, just
explained
hold your
because
breath.
yeah, hold your breath and hope that it doesn't pollute the environment and the homeowners don't get sick. No big deal. Anyways, so I told him, I said, you got to call the customer back. He's like, what do you mean? I said, call the customer back and explain to them
Yeah.
we do not cut up freezers. And then he called his customer back and was like, hey, I know you wanted us to cut up the freezer in the basement because they knew that they had put the freezer in and then built some walls around, right? And he's like, hey, actually, we don't cut up freezers because of Freon. And the lady goes, oh my God, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, let me get, like, how do I abate that? And he's like, oh, you call an HVAC company and they can pull the Freon out. And then once it's pulled out, then we can cut it up, right? But we have to see that the line's cut before we make any more cuts. And then, right, and or have them cut it up and haul it out for you. They're already there, like, whatever. She was so thankful that we told her that because she wasn't thinking that. And again, that's the quality aspect. I'm not going to do what the customer wants me to do solely because they want me to do it. I'm going to maintain my standard. And the analogy I gave to our employee the other day, who ended up having the conversation with the customer, was, can you order a steak at McDonald's? Can you walk into McDonald's and be like, hey, I want a sirloin steak medium rare? No. Well, you serve food, don't you? Well, yeah. Okay, why don't you serve me a steak? Well, it's not what we do, and that's no different with us.
Well,
Like we don't do
big
yard
skill,
waste.
big,
Like
yeah. And
there's a lot
the
of shit we
biggest
don't do
skill an
that people
owner
call
can
us for.
have, one of the biggest skills an owner can have is knowing when and how to say no.
Yes.
I call it a skill because it takes practice, it takes
Oh yeah.
repetition, and it's a very unique process to learn that. But I learned it. I mean, you have to say no in certain situations or you're gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah.
I have to actually get off of here. Um, but I did want to say a big shout out to, I saw
Shut
that
up.
you had a naming ceremony for your
Yeah.
warehouse,
Oh yeah. Yep.
in memoriam to Tommy, which is awesome. I thought so. Kind of wanted to do a shout out on that,
Yeah.
and
I'll.
I wanted
Yeah.
you wanted to say anything about it.
Oh yeah. No. We lost a guy on our team, Tommy. Tommy Bigwood. Literally, 24 years old. Went to bed one night and stopped breathing. Heart stopped beating in the middle of the night. They got him revived ish. And it never got out of the coma state. And so I talked about this podcast in the past, and then so this
Hmm.
last week, as part of our open house, we rededicated our building. It's now the Bigwood Building, and dedicated it to him and his memory, and his family was there, and it was big because, and it's one thing to say, oh hey, we're a community based business and we're a family and we have great culture.
Hmm.
It's a whole other thing to do it, and when we did see Tommy off, like we were there and we were part of it, and his family even said at the ceremony, like, oh hey, we can see why he loved coming here so much. We can see why, like, he left for a year, when our business was under different ownership, and then he came back because he's like, okay, it's a family again. And Tommy
Hmm.
started with us when he barely turned 19, and so it's like, yeah, we held him to a standard and we taught him what it meant to be a good employee and a man and all those things. And then we named the building after him because we held that standard. We're not like, oh, we lost one of our employees, no big deal. No, it was a big fucking deal. It still is. So hey, I appreciate you bringing that up because business is sterile and Excel spreadsheet and numbers as it is. Business at the end of the day is personal, and business is about the people. And as a business owner, it is your obligation to take care of your people, and people being you first and foremost, and your family and your employees. And the way you do that is by putting the work in day one. This is my takeaway. Day one, document everything.
Hmm.
Document what went right, document what went wrong, document what you're going to do about it moving forward, so you have a sustainable company that you can pass on potentially to your family or sell off or whatever, create generational wealth, right? The goal of getting a business for yourself is to create freedom, and discipline and consistency creates freedom. There's my top takeaway. Casey, top takeaway before we get off and on with our
Yeah,
lives
well
this week.
said. Top takeaway, honestly, is look, processes are important. They are, but the bigger you get, the more you grow, the more important it is that your culture,
Mm,
is taken into consideration. You are creating a culture in your business. And at the end of the day, whenever you walk away, if you walk away from it, are you going to walk away and look back and say, man, I did good, or I'm going to miss this place? Or are you going to run away, um, not wanting to look back? For me,
hmm
like I said before, the name on the side of the truck was just a name. The culture we built, to this day, I still talk. to a lot of the team guys, the guys that were on my team, because we created a really good culture, and I'm proud of that.
Hmm.
It also made us the best. We were the best because of the people. It had nothing to do with our prices or name
Hmm.
or flashy marketing. It had everything to do with who was behind the wheel and who was in front of the people doing the work. That right there is the biggest attribute to our success in junk removal. And to this day, I always tell everybody I meet when they ask about what I do and why I do this. Dude, I work for vets now. I work with a nonprofit, and I promise you, it's not for the money, but it's because the culture. I miss being a part of building culture. So
Hmm.
you know, processes in turn start to build a culture in your business, and keep that in mind. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. I put in the groups, by the way, um, tip of the day, color coding your tools and
Hmm.
equipment.
I
And I
like it.
asked, we want to know, what processes do you implement in your business that maybe we haven't spoke about, or maybe we don't know about, or
Yeah.
maybe you want to add to what we've said. We always enjoy feedback. We would love to have you on the show, especially if
Hmm.
you can put some value out to our listeners. We want to put you on that stage,
Yep.
and then
The,
that's it. Yeah.
yeah. The goal here, right, from day one, is to share our knowledge, so that we drive a level of professionalism that otherwise hasn't been seen in junk removal. So,
Hmm.
on behalf of the Jobber, the Meat Church, and the Bigwood Building, I'm Andy. He's Casey. It's been another amazing week in the Trash Talk Business Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next week.